My name is Leo. At least it was. I don't know what it is now, or if names even matter out here. I'm a restorer. I take old, broken sounds, and I make them whole again. It's a quiet job, or it used to be. I'm recording this on my old Tascam. Field recorder. It's the only thing left with batteries. It's the silence out here. It's not empty. It's heavy. It listens. And I think it's finally learned my name. If you're hearing this, then you've found my work. But this isn't a restoration. This is a warning. It all started as these things so often do with money, or rather, a profound lack of it. I was buried, crushed under a mountain of debt that felt more solid than the city I lived in. Freelance audio restoration is a niche market, and the bills were piling up faster than the work was coming in. I was weeks from losing my apartment, my equipment, everything. So when the email landed in my inbox, it felt less like a job offer and more like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. The sender was anonymous, communicating through a heavily encrypted service. The offer was almost offensively generous. $100,000 for 1 month's work? The catch? The job and I had to be completely isolated. The location was the old Blackwood Radio Observatory, a defunct relic from the Cold War era, planted in the most desolate, godforsaken stretch of West Texas you can imagine. Miles of flat, cracked earth in every direction, with a sky so vast and empty it felt like a judgment. My task was to restore the final audio logs of a Dr. Eris Thorne, the observatory's last resident scientist, who had vanished without a trace. In the late 1970s, the benefactor, my mysterious client, had recently acquired the site and everything in it. The rules were strict, non-negotiable. I would be driven to the site with all my gear. For 30 days, there would be no internet, no phone service, no contact with the outside world. A month of complete and total isolation. For $100,000, I would have signed up to restore audio logs on the moon. I said yes, without a moment's hesitation. A week later, a black SUV with tinted windows picked me up before dawn. The driver was a block of a man who didn't say a word the entire 8-hour drive. We watched the city bleed into suburbs, then suburbs into farmland, and finally, farmland into a rust-colored wasteland that seemed to stretch into infinity. The observatory rose from the plains like a monument to a forgotten god, a massive, skeletal dish, rusted and motionless, aimed at the empty blue sky. Below it sat a squat, concrete bunker-like building, half buried in the earth. It was a place built to listen to the cosmos, but now it just seemed to be listening to the wind. The driver helped me unload my cases of equipment, oscilloscopes, reel-to-reel decks, digital converters, forensic audio software, and then handed me a heavy key. "The generator is full," he grunted, the first words he'd spoken all day. "Another fuel delivery will be made to the exterior tank in 2 weeks. You won't see or hear them. Your payment will be wired the day you are retrieved. Do not leave the grounds." And then he was gone, his SUV a shrinking black speck on the horizon, leaving me utterly, profoundly alone. The inside of the observatory was a time capsule. The control room was a symphony of obsolete technology, huge consoles studded with bakelite, knobs, flickering analog meters, and the faint, dusty smell of hot vacuum tubes and ozone. A layer of fine red dust covered everything. My workspace was the main desk, which looked out through a thick pane of plexiglass at the colossal silent dish outside. It was in a climate-controlled vault off the main room that I found my prize. A series of magnetic reel-to-reel tapes, carefully cataloged in Dr. Thorne's spidery handwriting. These were his final logs. The first few days were peaceful. The work was meticulous, engaging. The tapes were degraded, but my initial restorations were promising. Thorne's voice, a calm, measured baritone, filled the control room as I worked. He spoke of pulsars and quasars, of mapping cosmic background radiation. It was exactly what I expected. The strangest thing about those first days was the silence. In the city, there's a constant low-level hum you don't even notice until it's gone. Here, there was nothing. No traffic, no distant sirens, no hum of a million lives pressing in around you. The silence was absolute. So absolute, in fact, that it felt unnatural. It was a physical presence, a weight in the air that seemed to press in on my ERRUMS. By the end of the first week, I started noticing something else. Sound so quiet it was almost a feeling. A low, resonant hum deep in the bass frequencies. Right on the edge of human hearing, checked my equipment, shut down the power grid to the building, and listened in the pure, generator-powered silence. It was still there. A faint thrumming, like a colossal engine, idling miles beneath the earth. My spectrum analyzer couldn't pick it up. My microphones couldn't detect it. But I could feel it in my teeth, in the bones of my skull. I wrote it off as an artifact of the building, or maybe just the first sign of my own mind starting to fray. From the isolation, it was on day 9 that the tapes began to change. I was working on a log dated October 12, 1978. Thorne's voice was different. The calm, scientific detachment was gone, replaced by a strained, agitated edge. Double quotes. ... The signal anomaly persists. His voice crackled through my monitors, newly rescued. From decades of decay, it's not cosmic. The dish isn't picking it up. None of the instruments are. But I can hear it. Low, pervasive hum. It doesn't seem to be coming from the sky. It seems to be leaking from the silence between the stars. It's a carrier wave with no information. A sound that isn't a sound. A cold dread trickled down my spine. It hurt it too. I worked feverishly, my professional curiosity now mixed with a growing sense of unease. Over the next week, I restored tape after tape, and with each one, I followed Eris Thorne's descent into obsession. He stopped talking about pulsars and started talking about the hum. He called it the silence frequency. His logs became erratic, filled with long, unnerving pauses. Sometimes he would just sit in silence for 10 minutes before whispering. "It's louder today," described it just as I was experiencing it. A vibration you felt more than you heard, a pressure in your bones. He tried to record it, building bizarre custom microphones, but the tapes always came back with nothing but room tone. Meanwhile, my own experience was escalating. The hum was no longer a subtle feeling. It was a definite, audible presence, especially at night. Lying in my cot in the small living quarters, I would listen to it thrumming through the concrete foundation, a deep, hypnotic rhythm like a monstrous heartbeat. Sleep became difficult, and when it came, it was filled with anxious dreams of vast, empty spaces and a low, guttural vibration that shook my entire body. I started talking to myself, just to break the monotony of the oppressive quiet. In the incessant hum, my own voice sounded thin and alien in the dead air of the observatory. I would narrate what I was doing, a running commentary on gain stages and noise reduction. It was a flimsy shield against the encroaching madness of the place. The real turning point came during the 3rd week. I was working on a heavily damaged tape, one of the last in the collection. The magnetic oxide was flaking off, and the audio was a swamp of hiss and static. I spent 12 hours painstakingly filtering it, isolating the fragments of Thorne's voice, and that's when I heard them. Behind Thorne's increasingly panicked words, buried deep in the noise floor, were other sounds. Faint, sibilant whispers. They weren't human. The cadence was all wrong, a series of soft, wet clicks and long, drawn-out hisses, a language made of static. ... It has a voice, Thorne was saying, his own voice trembling with a mixture of terror and awe, the silence. It has a voice. I can almost understand it. It speaks in the gaps, in the moments you're not listening, and behind him the whispering rose and fell, a sibilant tide in an ocean of noise. My blood ran cold. This wasn't isolation sickness. This wasn't in my head, and it wasn't in his. We were both hearing the same thing, separated by 40 years of silence, driven by a new, frantic urgency. I started exploring the observatory. I needed to know what Thorne had discovered. In his small, dusty office, I found notebooks filled with his spidery scrawl. The astronomical charts gave way to complex, terrifying equations that seemed to be trying to map the structure of silence. Itself, he had drawn diagrams of the observatory, not as a receiver for cosmic signals, but as a giant tuning fork, designed to resonate with a specific silent frequency. The dish wasn't pointed at a star. Its position, I realized after cross-referencing his notes with an old star chart, was aimed at a patch of sky known for being unnaturally empty. A void between galaxies. He believed something lived in that void. Something ancient, patient, and utterly silent. A predator that didn't hunt with sound, but with the absence of it. He believed the hum was the sound of it breathing. The whispers were getting clearer on the tapes, and I started to hear them in. The observatory itself, faint hisses that seemed to come from the corners of the room when I wasn't looking. The soft click of a switch in an empty hallway. The feeling of being watched was constant, a physical weight on my shoulders. I began to feel like a specimen. Under a microscope, the silence wasn't just listening, it was studying me. I barricaded the door to the living quarters at night, but it was a useless gesture. The hum vibrated right through the concrete. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls. I was living on coffee and adrenaline, my hands shaking as I worked on the final, most heavily damaged tape. It was labeled simply, October 29th, 1978. Final. Took 2 days to restore a usable signal. The tape was mangled, as if Thorne had tried to destroy it. When I finally threaded it and pressed play, his voice was barely a whisper, raw with terror. God. Oh God. It knows I can hear it, he rasped, the sound of his ragged breathing filling my headphones. All this time, I thought I was listening to it, but it was listening to me. This place isn't a receiver, it's an amplifier, a beacon. It draws it in. There was a loud crash on the tape, the sound of equipment being swept from a desk. What doesn't? Like to be heard? Thorne screamed, his voice breaking. It doesn't like being noticed. It's here, in the silence. It has a shape. It's made of. His words were cut off by a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a sound that broke all the rules of audio engineering. It was a deep, guttural pop, followed by a wet, tearing noise, and then a wave of absolute, perfect digital silence. Not an absence of sound, but the sound of absence. A recorded void that my software couldn't even process. The waveform was a flat, dead line. It was the sound of a voice being erased from existence. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Stumbled back from the console, my breath catching in, my throat. I had to get out. To hell with the money. To hell with the job. I ran to the main door, the heavy steel door that led to the outside world, and fumbled with the locks. As my fingers closed around the handle, every light in the observatory flickered and died. The hum of the generator, the whine of my equipment, the low buzz of the emergency lights, it all vanished. I was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness, a solar storm. The briefing had mentioned the possibility, a rare but potent event that could knock out all electronics in the region. I was trapped. And the silence that followed the power failure was unlike any that had come before. It wasn't empty, it was full. Its hum, no longer masked by the generator, was now the only thing in the universe. It was a deafening, bone-jarring vibration that filled the air, the floor, my own body. And inside the hum, the whispers were no longer faint. They were clear right beside my ear, clicking, weaving a language of pure dread in the blackness. I realized the horrifying truth. The observatory's power, its electronic noise, had been holding it back, like a cage of sound. Now, that cage was gone. I was in the dark, with it. The silence now had a texture, a geography. I could feel it moving in the room with me. Subtle. Shift in the air pressure to my left, sudden cold spot to my right. It was hunting, and I knew with a certainty that turned my blood to ice that the slightest sound I made would be a dinner bell. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. My own frantic heartbeat, a thunderous drum in my ears. I didn't dare breathe. It was a predator of silence, and I was in its domain. My only hope was my old Tascam, a battery-powered analog device, a relic, an antique. My hand, trembling violently, crept to the bag at my feet where I kept it. My fingers brushed against the cold metal casing. I knew it was a risk. The click of the button, the whir of the tiny motor, would be a shout in this dead world. But the thought of vanishing without a trace, like Thorn, was even more terrifying. This story had to be told. With a final, desperate prayer, I pressed the record button. It's here. It's in the room with me. The power is out. The silence. It's alive. I can feel it. Eris Thorn was right. It's not from space. It was always here. Waiting in the quiet places. I don't know what it looks like. Can't see anything, but I can feel it. It's big. It feels like the whole room is contracting around me. The hum is inside my head now. The whispers are telling me things. Horrible things, I think. I think it's curious. It's never been heard like this before. It doesn't know what I am, oh God. It heard the recorder. I feel it turning towards me. The air is getting so cold. It's very cold. The door, the main door, to the control room. I locked it. I know I locked it. Creaking open. The sound, it's so loud in the quiet. It's coming in. It's standing in the doorway. I can't see it, but I can feel its shape. A hole in the dark, patch of nothingness that is so profound it's the only thing I can see. The hum has stopped. The whispers have stopped. Everything has stopped. It's just waiting, I think. I think it's going to make a sound, its own sound, not the hum, not the whispers. It's the one it makes when it's done listening.